Hi, my name is Cassandra, and this is the Healing Grief Podcast. Now, I'm going to be totally vulnerable and open up about why I haven't posted up my first episode. A few weeks ago, I recorded a 75-minute long episode sitting in my bed talking about the whole story about my mother. And I cried, and then the next day, I had this emotional hangover, and it was basically like I had another therapy session sitting in my room. And then I realized that my story of my mom is so complicated that I need to break it up into two episodes. But really, what I need to talk about first is how I got started on this journey. My mom died in 1983, and I didn't really process her death until I quit drinking when I was 32. The year I surpassed the year she lived. She died at age 31. And since then, I've been able to heal a lot of things and really feel, you know, the effects of grief that I wasn't able to feel before when I was so young and then in my 20s when I got into drugs and alcohol. I had all these notes for that episode and I felt like I was rushing, and then some current stuff has been going on with my family. And so I've been navigating this different kind of grief, and I'm not really open to talk about that yet. Maybe I will in the future. So for the past few weeks, I've been contemplating how to move forward. And then something about grief and missing somebody and losing somebody so young is you kind of feel like everything should be perfect. And in the past, I've been somewhat of a control freak because I feel like if you can control your environment, bad things can't happen. But that is honestly a response. You can't prevent bad things from happening. Grief is an ever changing monster, and sometimes it's dull and then hidden in the back, and sometimes it rushes forward and scares the shit out of you. There are times where everything's fine in my life, and I feel, the spiritual connection to my mom, and, I'm going through my days and making her proud, making us proud, as I like to say. But then other days I'll hear a song or I'll see someone that looks like her or something, and I I call them lightning tears because it feels like I've been shot by lightning and they just come out of nowhere. And when I was growing up, my mom always said to me, "Don't cry, babies cry." And so I was kind of trained not to cry, but for the past, I don't know, 7 years or so, or 8 years, it's just been a flood because I decided in 2017 that I was going to write a memoir about mom because the way she died is so strange and unique, and actually I was lied to about how she died. That's why I have to break up this episode about her because it's very complicated how everything went down. But since I started writing that book, I've been discovering things about her. I've been kind of getting to know her as an adult. And actually, I met one of her best friends when she was younger only 2 weeks ago. And I had been looking for this woman for a long, long time. And I'll talk about that soon. It's crazy, like how I'm getting to know her more and more every day, and she's not here. So I really want to talk about that and teach people that, yeah, maybe your loved one isn't here physically, but they could be here, spiritually, emotionally, and through memories. Memories are the key to really having our loved ones with us for all time. And so I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do with this first episode? I launched it like over a month ago. I need to get something out. And I've been very hard on myself, just like I've been hard on myself about the book and not completing it yet. But now I kind of realized that it wasn't time for it to come out yet. I'm still discovering the story. And through this podcast, I want to do interviews with people who knew her and other people have lost people. So not only will this podcast help me finish my book, but I wanted to help people deal with their own grief and help the people I talk to. I'm very excited but nervous about interviews. I want to start setting things up. I want to be consistent with this podcast. And so right now, this is me getting it out there and not trying to be perfectionist because, when you have trauma in your life, and I really do feel like I have PTSD, like, the control freak, the one that needs perfection, the one that needs to know what's going on because, I have all these fears of abandonment, fears of losing people. Like, for example, when I first got my cat 7 years ago, Max, I would be so afraid that he would die when I was at work. Like, it was like this irrational fear that was constant. As much as I try to preach, yeah, when someone dies, they're still around spiritually. There's nothing like having the person you love with you. And that's why I'm very vocal with people. Like, love people while they're here. Tell them how you feel while they're here. Hug them. Call them. Don't just rely on social media to know what's going on in someone's life. I was just telling my family, I wish we could go back to sending letters with a stack of photos. I really miss, you know, that one on one analog connection. I would really like people to get back to that. So I only felt it to be appropriate to read my first chapter from my memoir. I'm calling it Dandelion Butterfly because mom and I used to go on these really long walks and pick dandelions. She taught me how to blow on the white, fluffy ones and make wishes, or she'd take the yellow ones and pop the heads off and say, Mama had a baby and her head popped off, which I always thought was so funny and strange. And then Butterfly because when I started going to therapy in Beverly Hills, yes, I had a shrink in Beverly Hills. I started to really heal then, and I started seeing these white butterflies around me all the time. And since I moved back to Michigan almost 2 years ago, I see them constantly. Like, they're where I am more than I've ever seen somewhere. So I really believe she's happy I'm back in Michigan and living off Lake Michigan the way we did in Escanaba. So here is my reading of Chapter 1 of Dandelion Butterfly. A mother is a child's first home. A hypnotist once explained to me that the subconscious is created from ages 0 to 8. These were the very years I was with my mother, Janelle. Mom was a quiet, petite, 5'2", 30-year-old housewife with a rocker chick vibe. Her style icons were Nancy Wilson from Heart or Joan Jett. She had loved the latter's hair so much she had once brought a photo of her to a hairstylist to duplicate. Although it was frowned upon in her Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church, she dyed her hair bright blonde to match mine because she wasn't happy with her dirty blonde shade. We became big and small images of each other. She had long bangs, and I had the bangs she chose for me, straight across my eyebrows. Whenever we would go somewhere, people would remark about how much we looked alike. We had planned on entering into a mother daughter look-alike contest once because we were told we looked like twins nearly every day. My shy mother, who hated having her photo taken, was willing to go on stage with me because she was so sure we would win the $1,000 cash prize. Unfortunately, my father messed it up by keeping the car away too long on one of the few days a month he would come home from working on the road as a long haul truck driver. Since my 6-year-old brother Shane was born in 1986, Dad was always away for weeks at a time, and Mom would become both parents to us. Friday, June 26, 1992, was a sticky summer day in Glasgow, Kentucky, and Mom, Shane, and I were out running errands. I crawled into the pillowy royal blue seat of our family's new gray 1981 Cadillac DeVille, never imagining it would be the last time. My family had just moved into our two-story house from our single-wide trailer in Escanaba, Michigan. Dad had finally gotten Mom the white house and picket fence she had always wanted. He was on the road again, and it was back to the trio of us, and I was promoted back up to the front passenger side seat next to Mom. I always looked up at her face for instructions on what to do about the radio by watching her expressions. I was weeks away from turning 9 years old, and I was an expert at reading her moods. She didn't say much, but her face told you everything. I could always tell if she liked a song or not. Sometimes I had to reach into her black hole of a giant purse, nearly the size of my 3 foot tall little brother, to find a tape she wanted to hear. Mom stopped by the post office first to drop off letters to her sisters, then we drove to the IGA on Happy Valley Road to do some grocery shopping. We walked into the air conditioned store with sighs of relief. I looked over at Mom, who was guiding her right hand along the shopping carts while holding onto Shane's hand with the other until she reached the open cart at the end. She reached down to lift Shane up into the cart seat after feeling around for the top of his head. I thought maybe the bright sun had messed with her eyes. We continued down the opening of the store. Bins of goods were down the center of the aisle. Mom slammed the cart into one of the bins, making a crashing noise. People turned their heads. Mom steadied herself before turning around to the bread section that was on the right. She reached down to grab a loaf of generic white bread from the shelf, turned around, and slammed her body hard into the side of the shopping cart. The bread flew from her hands onto the floor with a fluffy splat. Mom, why are you being so silly? I laughed as I reached down for the bread. Cassandra, I can't see. I stopped laughing when I looked up at her face. I hadn't seen this look on Mom before. Her eyes were furrowed and worry, but with a sad blank stare in her eyes, her mouth in a growing frown. Her posture began to curl into her itself. My strong, healthy mother had this new look of vulnerability, and she seemed childlike in an instant. She rubbed her eyes, which had shifted into a blank, lightless stare. Mom reached down as she felt the side of the cart, but then moved her hand around the cold metal until she touched the soft white hair on Shane's head. She moved herself to the front of his cart so his little feeties, as we called them, dangled in front of her stomach. Cassandra, I'm going to hold on to this cart. You only need to find butter and milk, and then we'll leave. Pull on the front of the cart, and direct us to the refrigerated section. Shane looked up to search her face for recognition in her eyes. There is none. A hot electric heat entered the center of my chest and spread throughout my limbs, causing me to start to tremble softly. It was a new feeling for me, confusion mixed with frenzied fear. Okay, are you ready? I said in a shaky voice while my small hand reached behind me to curl my fingers around the cold front of the nearly empty cart. Yes, she gave Shane a weak smile that didn't reach her empty eyes. The music playing on the store speakers dulled into a silent hum while I silently pulled us down the aisle to the dairy section with my only 4'5" kid strength. Get the cheapest butter and a half-gallon of milk, Mom whispered behind me. I did as I was told, then went back to them to guide us out of there. I was too young to be anything but scared, but I thought this was a mistake, something temporary. I slowly turned the corner, guiding Shane and Mom behind me until we got to the checkout at the front of the store. When our train of fear reached the cashier, I saw the woman's face grow in confusion as we approached. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling great right now. I have a $5 bill. Will that be enough? Mom said while I reached up to place the bread, milk, and butter on the counter. The cashier looked down at me and tried to force a smile before looking up to tap on the register keys until the change door popped open with its familiar jingle. Of course, it's fine. Here's your change. Mom reached her hand out 3 feet away from the cashier's waiting hand and hit some signage next to the register. I started to feel embarrassed, so I reached up to take the change instead before taking the coins and placing them in Mom's trembling hand. Thank you, Mom and I echoed to the cashier before I guided us outside towards the DeVille. We walked out of the store, and as soon as the sun touched our faces, after we cleared the awning above us, I turned to look at Mom. The lines around her face morphed from annoyed anger to constricted lines of anguish and uncertainty. The lines stretched over to my own face, a smaller copycat version of her own. Mom, what's happening? Are you okay? Her frown grew when she realized not even the bright sun could reach her eyes. I don't know what's wrong. I can't see a thing. Everything is black. We need to get to the hospital. How? Can you drive? Should I? No, of course not. Don't be ridiculous. I need you to direct me. Tell me where to turn and when there's cars around. Do you see any blue signs with the big blue H on them? I looked around until I spotted one down the street behind us. Yes, let's go. Mom lifted Shane from the shopping cart and I guided them both into the car holding my mother's back before opening the gray doors for them. The hot metal door handle blazed in my hand. I let go to reach for Mom's hand and held it as I walked her to the driver's seat, while Shane crawled up into the backseat behind her. I gently shut their doors after I made sure they were all the way in. Seatbelts, Mom said softly as I walked around to my spot in the front seat next to her, crawling into the soft seats until my feet barely touched the car floor. I looked up at her, then took my hand to reach up and wave it in front of her face. She didn't notice. I kept hoping she was playing some cruel prank, but her posture and vacant expression only made it horrifyingly real. I directed us towards the exit facing Happy Valley Inn and then to the right onto Happy Valley Road. The road was winding and full of hills. A nervous wreck, I became Mom's eyes as I looked around for the blue signs and told her when to turn and when there was a stop sign or car in front of us. Okay, now turn right. There's no cars. Okay, now turn left. There's a car turning ahead. It went on, no radio, and silence from Shane. The hospital had been a mile from the grocery store. Once we got to the hospital, I walked us inside between Mom and Shane, holding both their hands through the tall white pillars surrounding the hospital doors. I sat Shane down in the waiting room, and Mom said, "Shane, stay right there. Cassandra's going to take me over there, but she'll be right back." Hand in hand, I walked her to the counter, which I could barely see over, guiding her hand so she knew where it started. "Go sit with your brother," Mom said while a nurse started to ask her what was wrong. The nurse came around the counter and walked Mom into a room holding her hand, with another guiding her by the shoulders. I sat there with Shane waiting. With every minute that passed, I longed to see her again and for her to tell me everything was going to be okay. After about an hour, I saw Mom come around the corner in a wheelchair, slumped more over herself, but the look of confusion and uncertainty had turned into something different. Like the fight in her had drained away in that hour. She had gone from looking like a lost little girl to an older, worried woman. I felt like I had to take care of her, but I didn't know how. I wasn't ready to take the same leap in time she had taken in that anguished hour. Because my dad was away and the only people we knew in town were our landlords, the hospital had reached our landlady. Landlady came to drive us home. She looked down at me with a similar forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something was wrong, but she tried to remain positive as we left the hospital and went back to the house to wait for Mom to get done with whatever tests they needed to do. I wondered if my mother would ever be able to see again. All of a sudden, I longed for her to brush my hair and pick out an outfit for me. How could she do that with no sight? Who would feed and drive us to school? Would I have to start cleaning the house? She was our protector. Who was going to protect us now? Although Mom didn't vocalize it very often, I could see it in her eyes that she loved me. I needed her to show me how to exist in the world. Mom didn't say much when she came home that night. She could see again, but it wasn't like before. Her sight started to come and go, and one eye would float away from focus. She tried her best to act normal, but losing her sight rattled her usual resilience, and she started to hide in her room. I had been very excited because the first time in my 8 years of life that I had my own room, I didn't have to share one with Shane. We had the whole floor to ourselves with the playroom in the middle. I ran circles on the sky blue carpet. I couldn't wait to dance around in that space. Mom had to hit one more garage sale before we left Escanaba, and she had come back with a surprise for me, a gold Baroque mirror with high spelled out in scotch tape on the bottom left. She told me it was for my dancing. This was huge for us. I felt like she was finally embracing the fact that I loved to dance. Dance was also frowned upon in her church, so she had resisted it for years. Dad helped me hook up my first big girl stereo before he left. No more mini boombox for me. I had finally gotten a copy of George Michael's Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1 that I had been wanting since watching the Freedom 90 video so many times on MTV. Mom and I had argued whether or not George was in that video. She was correct, he wasn't. I opened the tape deck and put the cassette in place before shutting the cassette door and pressing the play button. Praying for Time blasted out of the speakers in a sonic boom. I had totally forgotten that Shane and I were supposed to stay with our Aunt Debbie in Westmoreland, New York for a few weeks. Dad was going to take us up to New York in a semi truck, while Mom stayed behind and got settled in the house. All of our things were still packed in boxes. Mom had to remind me, "We've had this plan since April. You were so excited about it. You can't let Debbie down." "But Mom, I don't know if I should go now that you're not feeling well. Don't you need me to help you? What if your eyes stop working again?" "Don't worry about that. I want you to have a good time. It's almost your birthday. Besides, I need to unpack." "Did you find out what happened to your eyes?" "We are waiting for some results. It's grown up stuff. Now go pack your bag." "Go upstairs," she'd say when she'd see me peeking around the corner. I gave up and retreated to my stereo, trying to drown my worries in music. I had developed this way after having to drown out fights I had heard between my parents. I didn't want to hear any more yelling. The next day, Shane and I loaded up in the truck. I wanted so badly for Mom to come with us, even if it was just for the ride. I didn't want her there alone with the possibility that her eyes could fail her again. I didn't understand why Dad was okay with leaving her behind. "Are you sure you can't come?" I pleaded to her. "No, I told you, I need to unpack these boxes. I need some alone time." Mom was stubborn, and I knew better than to push things with her. I climbed up the dirty metal semi truck stairs into the right front seat after Shane had climbed up and into the back. I looked out the huge truck windshield at my beautiful mother, studying her figure and blonde hair, longing for her to be in the front seat instead. She looked back at me with a constrained smile. "Have fun, be good." This didn't feel fun. Something was wrong, and they weren't telling me because I was a kid. I knew better. The last memory I have of the mom I knew waved goodbye to me as Dad's semi truck backed out of our long driveway enveloped by trees. Her fading eyes told me life was never going to be the same. On the next episode, we'll have part one of the story of my mom, Janelle. Thank you for listening. Please take care and remember forever.